Hello and welcome to today's video. In today's video, I'm going to take this treasure chest and turn it into a mimic. What is a mimic? Well, in Dungeons and Dragons and some fantasy video games and probably some other fantasy stories, maybe even movies, there are sometimes these treasure chests that the hero goes to get and it ends up being a monster. So I'm going to take some polymer clay, sculpt some teeth and some tentacles, and glue those in place and make this into my own version of the treasure chest mimic. Before I started filming, I went ahead and got all of my supplies ready. So I have my treasure chest here, and I went ahead and grabbed my ruler so I can measure the inside of it. And then I took some foil and sculpted it so it would act as a support for the tentacles I make. So when they're coming out, I can brush them over it. And then I have my clay ready, and I'm going to go ahead and mix up some beige, red, and white to use for the gums of the mimic monster. Now I want to go ahead and mix this as well as I can so it's nice and soft and easy to work with. And then I'm going to go ahead and roll out two sections that I can add the teeth to. So my inside of my treasure chest is about 2 3/4 inches long. So I don't want to go more than about 2.5 inches long, just to make sure I have some room to kind of shift them around so they line up okay. I'm using a ball tool to add some indentions in the gums so I have a place to push my teeth into. Now I'm going to go ahead and mix up some yellow and white to use as the color for my teeth. I figured he's not going to have a very pearly white smile, so I want to go ahead and make it a little more stained looking. So once I shape out the teeth, I push them into the gums. I try not to push them too hard to distort the sculpt, but hopefully enough pressure to keep them in place. It's going to be a breaking point of it, but this piece really shouldn't be handled very much, at least not in that area. So I think it'll be okay. At least that's my hopes. Now there's several different ways you can make teeth like this, and I've done it in a dozen different ways, but for these I started to do them, and then I realized it's easier to do them kind of as a cone shape and then press them into the gum area. That they would hopefully, stay better and be a little flatter for when I add it. I went ahead and took my needle tool and added some texture to them. And then this last tooth on the right side, I thought was a little bit too big. It didn't look right to me, so I went ahead and took that off and re-sculpted it. Now I'm using the ball tool to go ahead and add indentions so I can add the teeth to the bottom jaw area. I'm going to go ahead and do the same technique for these teeth. The only thing I want to make sure to do is keep them spaced so they alternate with the top ones. So even though the mimic isn't going to be able to close its mouth, I want it to look like the teeth would line up properly, that it would be able to close its mouth. This is something to keep in mind when making sculptures, and you want to have that sense of disbelief that this creature could be real. You want to have it so even though a treasure chest monster is totally unrealistic, you want its anatomy to look like it belongs in our world. So little things about like when it closes its mouth for its teeth to alternate is just one little touch to make that seem more believable. Now, like the top teeth, I'm going to go ahead and use the needle tool and add just a little bit of texture to it. Now, with the teeth and gums done, I'm going to go ahead and set those aside and mix up my clay for the tentacles. I decided I wanted to use yellow and green, just for no other reason than personal preference. I just thought that would be a nice combination of these tentacles coming out of the treasure chest. So I've got my foil here ready to drape the tentacles over. So once I get these mixed up, I can start shaping those and start draping them over the foil. So I didn't have quite enough clay for the number of tentacles I wanted to do, so I'm going to go ahead and soften up some more green clay and mix that in with the yellow and green that I already have started. And then I'll just cut it into enough pieces. I want to go ahead and do 5 tentacles. I just thought an odd number would be good. Then I took some foil and added some texture to the tentacles. Now, the reason why I did this is, one, I just thought it would look a little more interesting, and two, sometimes when you drape things over foil, that underside will pick up the texture of the foil. So instead of looking like that was a mistake, I made it intentional. And then after I did it, I kind of thought it looked like maybe these tentacles had seen some battles, that maybe some of the heroes that tried to open the chest, attacked it with their axe or sword or whatever. And so they've got, these scars and these wounds on there. So I thought that worked out really well. So as you can see here, it works really well to use this piece of foil to support the tentacles, and I can kind of shape them differently so they have a different look, and it gives you a different sense of movement with each tentacle. And then I went ahead and took the the foil I used for texturing, and used that to support one of the tentacles that was coming out farther so it would stay elevated with the rest of the tentacles. Now it's time to bake our clay. Remember, always bake your clay according to package instructions. After the clay has cooled, it's now ready to be glued into place into the treasure chest. So I'm just using my standard Loctite super glue gel, and then I go ahead and apply it and then press it into the treasure chest. Now this one tooth here did come loose, so I went ahead and pulled it off and added a little bit of super glue to the end of it there and pushed it into place. And hopefully the rest of them will hold okay. So the bottom teeth, I'm going to go ahead and line them up, so like I mentioned earlier, so it'll look like they belong there. And I figured, obviously he can't shut all the way, and I'm just figuring when the hero activates, or gets close to the mimic, its teeth kind of come down, kind of like a switchblade where they pop up and down, so they're more concealed, obviously, when the treasure chest is shut. Now I'm going to glue the tentacles in place. And I just put a little bit of super glue on the bottom and then press it into the base of the treasure chest. Now, another option would be to make like a piece of clay that was just a little bit smaller than the inside of the treasure chest and attach all of them to that and then place that in there. And that might work a little bit better, but this method worked out fine for me. And so I've got 4 of them in place. This 5th one is a little bit taller than I wanted it to be, and this is easy enough to cut down. I just kind of rocked the X-Acto knife back and forth so I don't crack it, and then just glue this one in place as well. Now with that done, I'm going to go ahead and gloss it. I use Sculpting gloss. And I want to go ahead and just really goop it on there so it looks all slobbery and wet. Normally when I gloss something, I don't want to have any excess on there because you just want it to have a nice shine. Like if I'm, just doing a figurine and I just feel like it needs a gloss coat. But for this, I really want it to be wet and slobbery. So I started with about a bottle that had about half left in it, so it was the normal consistency, and I went ahead and covered all the tentacles and the teeth and even the inside, like behind the teeth and the base of the treasure chest on the inside. Now once I get to the point where I feel like I've covered everything with the gloss, I went ahead and you see here I have a second bottle. Now this second bottle of gloss just has a very little bit left over from being used previously, and when you have this gloss left over and it sits for a long time, it gets really goopy. So I thought that would be really good to add it so I have more of a drool effect. And so I just take some of the areas and then just really just glop it on there, and I'm hoping as it dries, gravity will be my friend and pull it down so it looks like this thing is just a slobbery, wet, monster mouth. And so I'll just continue to go over the tentacles and the teeth until I'm, fairly happy with them. And hopefully it gives me the look I want out of it. Just a few more spots that I want to go ahead and just add a little more gloss to. You know, it's one of those things you don't want to overdo it, but you don't really know how it's going to look until that gloss kind of settles, drips, and dries. So hopefully this will give me the look I want. All right, let's take a little bit closer look at what I've got so far. So you can see here it's definitely dripping off the tentacles like I want. But you know, it's going to change quite a bit, you know, between now and when it's actually dry. I am going to go ahead and let him dry overnight, and then we'll look at the finished creation. And here is my finished mimic. So as you can see, the gloss definitely, you know, gooped up like I wanted it to in some places. But on this tentacle here, there was a pretty big spot and it either dripped off or just kind of, you know, shrunk up a little bit. But it does have a few nice places of it just dripping, so I am really happy with it. I think it was a nice effect. I don't know if you can kind of see in there. It's awfully dark, but there we go. So it is a little bit shiny inside, and the teeth have a nice gloss effect to them. So overall, I'm very happy with this project. I do have a ton of ideas to do more of these, but we'll just have to see what I can get to. If you like this video, please give it a like down below. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe to my channel. I try not to over mention that. I have a little thing at the end, but I did want to go ahead and mention it again since it's been a while since I personally mentioned it, and want you to know I really appreciate anybody who takes the time to subscribe to my channel and watches my videos. It really helps me out a lot. So thank you for that. If you have ideas for future videos, please leave them in the comments down below. Also, one last thing on this piece. I might add a little bit of glue here to see if that kind of locks up that hinge, or maybe even on the inside there, so it does not move and so these don't hit. But other than that, it does stay in place as long as I'm not messing with it. All right, well, thank you so much for watching today's video. And remember, never stop creating. Bye.